This episode is brought to you by
Co-creation.
Welcome to Leadership Actually. It's not love, it's leadership. Welcome, Lisa Powney.
Welcome, Lee Rogers. How the devil are you?
I'm dead good.
Are you?
Dead good, yeah.
Dead good.
Pucker.
Go on, why?
Guess what we won? The Rogers family, guess what we won?
What did you win?
The Croft Carnival Scarecrow competition.
No. Woo! Get you.
We have tried for 9 years. Me and Mand and Ella. We've tried for 9 years and we finally brought the trophy home.
What did you do?
So, a Chris Kamara set at Sky Sports, because the theme was football.
Yeah.
And there's a really famous broadcasting piece, and we basically reenacted it with the words that were said and whatever. And it looked mint. It was good. But it was a slight messy morning, as this podcast would allow. So I compared the day at the carnival. So I then open the envelope from the judges that's sealed that no one's seen, and then I see our address as the winner and what it is, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I've got to announce the fact that in front of like 3,000 people that I'm the winner of a competition that everybody's taken part in, and people have gone around millions. So I had to give like the chair of the committee the microphone to announce it, because it would have been and all my mates went straight away, fakes, like I can't believe it. But yeah, that was. Did
you get a trophy?
We did. We got
amazing.
a trophy.
9 years. Woo-woo.
It's on the mantelpiece. It wasn't a fix, can I just say? Because otherwise they would have done it way before 9 years.
Yeah.
And we got a present presented by the Mayor of Warrington.
Wow, that's big, isn't it?
Oh, in my little world, in my little village life. But the best bit, it was just an amazing day. When you see the whole community come together and have a blast and a good time, it was genuinely brilliant.
We love a community, don't we?
We do. And it didn't rain.
Hey, well, we have had a bit of a heat wave, haven't we? So that's been amazing.
Yeah.
Hot.
Yeah. So what have you been up to?
Well, I've been enjoying the amazing heat wave, so that's been really good. Been doing some work on my book, actually, Lee. So I've been expanding it to kind of a next version. So I've been doing some stuff on relationships, so only human relationship stuff. So I'm very excited about that. Choir's still going on. Yeah. So we've got lots of gigs, in retirement homes and stuff. Going up in the world, But I think that's where those choirs on Britain's Got Talent started, so you never know.
Well, on that, someone asked me to do bottomless bingo.
And I thought it was without trousers. I thought that was the new way.
It definitely wasn't that. You made me go red again. This is like a Titus moment. So it's a bit like bottomless brunch.
Oh.
But bottomless bingo.
Oh, not without trousers. Topless waiter, bottomless brunch, I thought. No. Okay.
I don't think it is that, no. I hope it's not that anyway.
I'd check, Lee. I would check.
I will check.
What you signed up to.
I will check, yeah. It's good due diligence, actually.
It's made my day, so, yeah.
The other thing I've got to say as well is, since Ella and Freddie were on the podcast, so Ella she auditioned for a musical theatre group.
Yes.
And then got accepted and offered, which quite an exclusive.
That's so amazing.
Musical
Well done,
theatre.
Ella. Well done.
So, proper, that is.
I know.
And you'll know that from
Absolutely.
Freddie, who's amazing and dead confident.
Yeah.
Ella, sometimes at school has to work really, really hard. So to see her flourish in something she loves, as a dad, I love that.
We love it. And when you're famous, which no doubt you will, remember, you came on this podcast.
And tried to beat us off.
They've been loving it, don't they? Yeah. Freddie had it shown at school, so there we are. We're famous in the school, yeah.
Wow. And YouTubers.
YouTubers, mum and dad. Famous parents. So, that was a really good fun. So, enjoyed that. And then we've been doing some work on this podcast live as well, haven't we? So, putting that into action and saying how we could take this on the road. So, that's exciting.
Yeah. always love meeting people and leaders and dealing with the issues. So we've spoken a lot about us. Should we get into today's guest?
Yeah. Thank you. Simon Toseland, how are you?
I'm really well, thank you. Yeah, great to be here. Suffering a little bit after the last night's game. Of course, it was England versus Mexico, but I've drunk plenty of coffee this morning, so I'm doing all right. I think.
You wired?
Thank you.
Are you wired?
I think so. Yeah.
Well, we'll take that definitely. You're wired, aren't we? We're all
For
on
sure,
coffee.
yeah.
We're
on
up.
double drinks.
Yeah, definitely. We're all up, and it was well worth it, wasn't it? What a game!
Oh, fantastic game. Yeah, really enjoyed it. You know, it takes two teams, doesn't it, to make a great game? And
Absolutely.
you know, I think Mexico sort of played their part in that as well. But yeah, really looking forward now to the next round.
Absolutely, it's exciting. And I think we can take a lot of leadership lessons. We can go like another podcaster from that, absolutely. But today is about you, so thank you so much for coming. I'm going to give you your official introduction, and then we'll dive a little bit more into who are you, if that's all right. So, Simon, you have spent your career helping organisations create safer places to work. But this conversation isn't really about health and safety, although I know that's your passion. You have worked in senior health and safety roles across complex operational environments, including Birmingham Airport, where you've helped shape a culture that goes far beyond compliance. Your work isn't about rules, paperwork, or policing people. It's about creating an environment where people genuinely care about one another. They take responsibility and feel confident to speak up. What's really interesting is that you don't see health and safety as a function. You see it as a window into organisational culture, because when people notice the little things, challenge poor behaviours, look out for each other and take ownership, health and safety becomes a reflection of leadership, trust and culture. And that's where we've met and come together on this space. So today we're going to explore what health and safety can teach us about leadership, why culture is built in everyday moments, and how creating a genuine culture of care benefits everyone. How's that?
Oh, really great. Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, absolutely. When you say it like that. But, you know, as with everything, and as you know, it's all about people. It's always a huge team effort whenever you try and make significant changes. You know, it's really about education and empowerment. And I think that's sort of how, you know, we've experienced the success I have over the sort of 25 plus years as a health and safety professional.
Amazing, and we will dive into that. But before we do, tell us a bit about you and your career. Who are, if I was, you know, in a coffee shop or down the pub or on the side of a pitch, and people said, who are you and what do you do and how have you got to where you are? What would you say? What's your career been?
Yeah, so I'm fortunate that I've had a very varied career. I think when you speak to most health and safety people, very often it's not a career they initially are drawn into. It very often happens by accident, and that's very much how, you know, I started out. I left school and went and did sports studies. Actually, I did 3 years doing my national diploma in sports. Got a job at a leisure centre. And quite a prestigious leisure centre at the time, sort of talking about the mid-90s, really before the explosion of leisure centres happened.
Yes.
So I was working at the Thomas Cook Leisure Centre in my home city of Peterborough. So Thomas Cook at the time had their HQ there, and they had this, what was at the time a really prestigious facility.
Yes.
You know, you had 25-metre swimming pools. There was spas and saunas, you had a sports hall, and because obviously it was attached to Thomas Cook, you had all the football, cricket, rugby, tennis courts, etc. as well. And we also had a 12-bedroom lodge attached to it. So, you know, that's where I got my first job. I sort of spent a few years there, worked my way up to duty manager. And I still remember now sort of roughly around the sort of mid to late 90s, really when sort of health and safety legislation started to really come into force, obviously with joining Europe, etc. as well. And I still remember the conversation now, my boss saying, we really need to do something about health and safety. Yeah. So they sort of offered to put someone on a course, and I thought, you know, sounds interesting, something a little bit different from lifeguarding, and sort of volunteered for that. And I actually spent 8 years there then. I was promoted to health and safety manager. Really don't think we had a risk assessment in sight at the time. But, you know, what a great way to learn about health and safety, you know, in
Yeah.
terms of all the different hazards and risks and contractors and sleeping residents and Legionella and manual handling, you know, it was all there. So sort of spent really good sort of 8 years there sort of building that safety management system from scratch.
Wow. And then what did you go on to do?
So having sort of done that, I worked for a small consultancy in Peterborough,
Yeah.
a company called Anglia Planning Supervisors. So some of you may remember the sort of first construction design management regulations that came out when you had the old planning supervisor role from 1994. So that was really good because it gave me a lot of exposure then to a lot of small, medium-sized organisations,
Yes.
particularly in construction as well. But amazingly, you know, we were such a tiny organisation. There were only 3 of us, but we had a contract with Endemol UK.
Wow.
And so, you know, we provided health and safety support for Big Brother, Fame Academy, The Match. So again, you know, in terms of, for me and my career,
Yeah.
being exposed to those situations and put in, you know, lots of times I was put on the spot. And I still remember getting those phone calls from Big Brother saying, "Can we put a grandfather clock into the house?" You know, so it was very, it was very sort of dynamic. Felt very reactive at the time,
Yeah.
but you know, again, just exposure to lots of different situations and really sort of put you in situations where you had to sort of think on your feet.
What a great way to be exposed to health and safety, isn't it, as well? Like, you know, to be able to have to think on your feet, as you say, you know, and
Yeah.
go, you know, and be in an uncertain world and just come and think about, well, what are the conditions
Yeah.
for health and safety in that space? Wow, that's really interesting.
Exactly that. Yeah.
So did you have to go on set and do risk assessments in the
Yeah,
house?
it was more a sort of on-site sort of health and safety sort of inspection, advisory role. So yes, it was on the set. Was on the set for the Big Brother eviction nights and you know, walking around the house, fame. And there was a lot of sort of carpentry happening. It was very much a really quite dynamic environment, constantly moving cables around. So yeah, it was really just being on site, on set, monitoring each and every day, really, and all the different activities that were happening.
Absolutely
So-
brilliant.
That's ace. You've got a story. That.
It's fantastic. I didn't
Didn't
know
think
that
we were
about
going
you.
there.
So yeah, so really took you out your comfort zone, and you know, particularly from the environment where I'd gone to into that.
Yeah.
You know, really quite interesting.
Amazing.
So,
And
yeah.
what was next then? Well, where did that take you?
Well, so then I went on to Turner and Townsend. And again, it was at a time now we were sort of talking about 2005, 2007 when I joined there. We'd had the new Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order that came out in 2005 and the CDM regulations were revised again. So there was lots of call for lots of consultancy work, particularly sort of fire risk assessment, CDM coordinators at the time. And again, you know, working now with some sort of blue chip organisations, some real high profile projects. You know, I remember one particular scheme which was the mechanical and electrical refurbishment of Crystal Palace National Sports Centre. So that was a project to get it up to pace, if you like, as a training venue for the Olympics. We had the Olympics come into the UK, didn't we, in 2012? Yeah. So very high profile, lots of different stakeholders in that. So yeah, again, sort of really, you know, lots of different exposure there to other types of risks and sort of much larger, sort of complex, high-profile projects.
I didn't realise as much, you know, I guess it now makes sense, but health and safety is access all areas. Like not only do you get to do that job, but, you know, you've got to experience behind the scenes of many exciting things as well.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's one of those things when you're in it at the time, you don't really think about it. You're doing your job.
Yeah.
You know, and it's such an important job to get right. And it's always that sort of constant balance between, look, this is compliance, this is operational health and safety. And so particularly when you're working in those kind of environments as well, you know, you really have to try and come up. And I always sort of say, you know, I think you talk to most people and ask them what their health and safety issues are, and pretty much everybody will tell you, you know, this is where we've got our key hazards and risks. But I think the secret for a good health and safety practitioner is really then coming up with the solutions.
Yeah.
You know, and coming up with, and very often it's not just one single issue. it's lots and lots of different things that you need to put in place to control that risk. So I've been really fortunate, and it's only actually coming in and reflecting on my career ahead of this podcast. It's really only then you really start to think about, actually, I've had some really good experiences for sure.
And how do you, I'm thinking about it. So when people say health and safety, I did some health and safety training only last night.
Yeah.
Right. So it was like manual handling, musculoskeletal kind of data, the things that I would probably have done in other organisations. And actually, I took it more serious this time because there's more of an element than there was in a previous organisation and situation. So I was tapped into it. I was kind of really conscious. It wasn't just click through to the end. I was genuinely curious around what's coming up. But how do you get people interested, say on the shop floor or whatever, in something that is so important that we possibly take for granted a little bit?
Yeah, I think what's absolutely crucial is keeping it relevant to their workspace and what they do day to day, and there's been so many, you can do a great manual handling course online, but it doesn't potentially address the specific issues that those people are actually dealing with day in, day out. And so whenever sort of I've gone into an organisation or worked with colleagues, it's really trying to fully understand exactly what are those key activities. And to be honest, I've always found the best people to know that are the people doing the job, and my message has always been, look, I'm a health and safety practitioner, I know how to do a risk assessment, but actually you're more qualified than anyone because you understand your job, you understand the nuances, you understand the challenges that you face each and every day. And so I think for me, it's really working and engaging with those frontline people. And whenever you're developing a safe way of working, or even some training, it's really taking that time to really understand those issues. And very often, people actually know the answers themselves. So the language, I think, is crucial as well. How you talk to people and how you try and draw that information out by asking the right questions in the right way.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter about the specifics per se, but what I did like and appreciate about the training I did, so yes, it was related to a role that I did, but I also got to learn what other colleagues was doing. And why that's important is if you ever rotated, actually you had an understanding and appreciation of what everybody goes through. Yeah. So you can become an observer, or you can be curious around what's going on, and therefore everybody in it together, if you so choose that kind of mentality, methodology type of stuff. So and therefore, I guess what part does culture have to play within health and safety and leadership of that?
It's absolutely crucial. You can be a compliant organisation but still have a poor safety culture. And exactly what I've just said. You can do some manual handling training, you can tick a box and you say, yeah, we're complying with the law, we've done our training. But actually, if people walk away from there and going, yeah, the training was all right, but actually it's got no relevance to what I do, actually you can really damage safety culture by doing the wrong thing, even though you might feel that you're actually being compliant. So it's really important, that whatever you do, you make it engaging, you make it right, you talk to people, and I think that's, to bring people along on that journey, that's exactly what needs to happen.
And we're going to dive a little bit more into that, actually, in terms of the culture, because I think it's really important. That's what we're here to talk about, I guess, with our leaders. But this is the messy class, so we are going to ask you, it sounds like you've had some amazing experiences and learnt some really good lessons. But is there a time or a moment in your career where things didn't go to plan? Maybe you faced a difficult challenge or leadership felt messy. And what did that experience taught you that you've used going forward?
Yeah, I've obviously during that time, like you sort of said, Lisa, I've worked with some quite, high risk, if you like, activities, and there has been times when things have gone wrong, and it has actually resulted in, enforcement action or enforcement intervention. But one thing that sort of I would say is really I've taken away from that is the importance of having a really clear plan and a really clear strategy that everybody understands. And, you know, when you look at health and safety, and when you think about some of those roles that I've had, you know, there's so many hazards and risks, and you can't do it all in one go, you know. But really taking that time initially to really understanding the organisation, spending that time talking to people all through the business, you know, from the top down, and putting together a really clear strategy. So it might be, look, you know what, we know we've got an issue over there, but actually, you know, working at height, for example, is the key risk to this organisation at this moment in time. These are going to be our priorities. But just having that plan in place is absolutely crucial. And, you know, I've been happy to say that although there has been some situations, we've always been able to adequately demonstrate the rationale behind our strategy and our processes. So, you know, that's something that, you know, obviously you learn from, and, you know, it's important to apply that to every organisation that you work with.
Absolutely. And was there a moment in time where you thought, actually, I need to do this health and safety in a different way? So you talk about, you know, getting to know the organisation and understand the people, and kind of they know their job more than any others, and focus on solutions rather than policing. Was there a particular moment in your career where you go, actually, you know, maybe looking at health and safety as a list of things that I have to do, and a health and safety report isn't going to shift the dial? Is there any places where that,
you know what,
kind of
funnily
changed?
enough, we're talking about England and the World Cup, we're talking about success, but I always remember, I can't remember the year now, but it was a few years ago now, and you may remember that Wales had a really good run. I think it was in the Euros. They got to the semi-finals
At one time.
and it was a few years ago now, correct. But I always remember, you know, ourselves included, everyone started to go through their family trees to say, have I got any Welsh ancestors? And what struck me was people like success. People like to be a part of something that's winning, that's doing well. And I thought, hang on, what if we applied that to health and safety? And what I mean by that is actually really making sure that we shared our successes.
Yes.
So it can be small wins. It might be that you've got a ROSPA Gold certificate or an ISO standard. But one thing I've always done is really publicly made everybody aware that it's through their actions and through their help that this was an achievement. And, you know, I've always found that saying thank you to people, thank you for working safely. Very often health and safety is all about when things go wrong, or, you know, I always remember when I used to phone up one of my directors and he said, oh, what have we broken now, Simon? But actually, when you can make health and safety really engaging and something that people want to be taught about and people want to talk about,
Yes.
and making it a success, then actually people want to be part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so is this around the culture of care and creating a culture of care?
Yeah, I think culture of care, you know, and certainly in sort of recent years when we think about well-being, when you think about environmental as well, that's really big. And all of these things, you know, as a health and safety leader, you have to work with all your different teams on, because there's so many overlaps between, you know, an environmental strategy, a well-being strategy. But actually, for me, a culture of care is encompassing all of those things. And, you know, it's for... Oh, sorry, start that again.
That's right.
It's really making people care about not only themselves, but their colleagues, but the environment they're working, the equipment that they're using. All of that comes together, I think,
Yes.
to make that culture of care. And, you know, I think once you've got that, then that's a real good culture to have within an organisation.
Absolutely.
So,
And I'm really curious then, have you ever had resistance versus, like with some senior leaders or executives, versus spend or creating that culture of care versus actually, you know, a tightened bottom line or time pressures or business pressure?
Yeah, I mean, this happens very regularly, as you can appreciate, particularly on those environments where you can't just stop work as much as we'd like to and pause for work and say, you know, some of those environments are very dynamic, and so it's always a balance. It's always having those conversations, but I think it is really about building those relationships up. I've always worked in, wherever I've worked, I've always felt comfortable knocking on the door of the CEO or one of the directors or wherever it might be and sort of saying, look, this is the situation, and having that conversation. And again, sort of making them part of that. Obviously, you put your case forward as a health and safety person. But ultimately, this term, as far as reasonably practicable, that has to be discussed at that level, because really the directors are the only ones that sort of know the financial position, the operational position, and health and safety is just one small part of that. So yeah, to answer your question, yeah, sometimes there are some quite difficult decisions that need to be made, but I've never worked in an organisation where that hasn't been embraced by senior leaders.
Amazing. And do you know, in terms of culture of care, I think that we're really aligned, because I like to talk about culture a lot, and how do we shape that in organisations. And I think health and safety is a really key indicator of culture. So some of the things that you might look for in a health and safety, or the way that people are behaving around health and safety, can indicate a lot around culture. And I advocate going in and walking the floor of organisations. So when you walk the floor and you go into an organisation, what sort of things might you see that others wouldn't? And what sort of indicators might tell you that what kind of culture is underneath there?
I think when you're walking around, every workplace is obviously going to be slightly different. I'm always interested, in terms of a lot of health and safety accidents are, in my mind, are very often down to people rushing to do the job quickly.
Yes.
People being tired, stressed or fatigued.
Yes.
Again, if you talk to any person, you ask them what the hazards and risks are, they'd probably be able to tell you. But actually, why is it people take what I call safety shortcuts?
Yes.
And very often it's one of those factors around they're under the pressure to do the job. So for me, that's really, particularly when you sort of see people working and they're doing, like construction is a great example. You can get to see quite quickly whether people are actually or are empowered to actually just stop and rethink things, and what I like to say, pause for safety.
Yes.
And that comes across, I think, quite easily. And especially if you just go and have a small conversation with people, and I love that. I like to sort of say, as I say, we'll always try and pick something positive to lead on.
Yes.
And going back to sort of the conversations, a vast majority of the time I'll say to someone, are you sure what you're doing is safe?
Yes.
And 99.5% of the time, if they're not quite working right, they'll say, oh no, I should be having the barriers up, or I should be. So, I think it's just trying to get them to actually see things for themselves, rather than just going up to them and pointing things out. But certainly those things that perhaps, the obvious things that sort of a layman would pick up, it's really just watching how people work and whether they feel empowered just to slow down or make sure they've got the right equipment, make sure they're doing things right, their pre-use checks, that kind of thing.
Sorry, I was just curious, when you were walking the floor, would you ever get a manager or leader to do the observation and then have a conversation with them? Because clearly you would audit it and probably know it because of your experience, but almost in a coaching type.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think, actually some of the best leaders are those that perhaps don't have the technical health and safety knowledge. And so it's going in and asking those questions. For example, what would I need to know if I wanted to do this job safely? What can I do to help you or support you in terms of health and safety? And actually, it just shows you've got that care. One thing I think, everybody, when you go and talk to people in different departments, they all live in their own world, and it might not be the most important thing to that business or to that leader at the time, but it's important to them. It's, it's those day-to-day things and those small struggles that people have to live with. It might be, there's a trip hazard on the floor they have to keep stepping over. Small things in the grand scheme of things, perhaps, but it's important to that individual. And so I think that's one thing I would say is always take each and every concern with the importance that it deserves. And yeah, it's, you know, as leaders, we try and have all the answers. We don't always. But some of the best health and safety initiatives I've sort of implemented have been through that talking to frontline people and finding out what their challenges are.
Great, and we'd like to hear one if that's okay in a minute. But I guess I know of a situation where we might have just ignored something, a small health and safety, and then you know, that might escalate, or as you said, a trip hazard, or you know, those sort of things. What do we talked about, maybe people are rushing or they're tired. What else prevents people from reporting some of those health and safety hazards and, you know, taking accountability for it?
Well, I think first and foremost is, do they actually understand how to report and how easy is it to report? So I think you've got to try and make that as easy as possible. I think secondly, in my experience, is making sure you give feedback.
Yes.
You know, and we've put in place health and safety objectives, reduced accidents, significantly raised near-miss reporting, all of those great sort of KPIs. But very often it's not actually putting numbers on things. It's actually encouragement through making sure people can report things easily, making sure you're constantly giving feedback, and sort of going back to what I said earlier, really, sort of saying well done and thank you for reporting this and thank you for making a difference. So yeah, I think they're probably the challenges. People perhaps don't feel safe about reporting something. You know, am I going to get blamed? Is my colleague going to get blamed for it?
Yeah.
So it's really important that they understand that's not going to happen. So I think it's all about really, particularly if you're just going to start an initiative, just making sure that that's absolutely clear and people fully understand, you know, what's expected of them, but also what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it does take time for sure. But it's definitely worth it, you know, putting that time in and spending. It doesn't have to be, you know, hours and hours as leadership, and it can actually be quite ad hoc. It's just as you're walking through the workplace, just taking that time to talk to people.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying, I guess, is a lot of speak up culture and creating that psychological safety so that people can report. And I know that you pride yourself on increasing those reporting mechanisms, so increasing those near misses, and I think you've got a number of examples where you've gone into organisations and really focused on that. And I guess at the beginning, having to report that to senior management that says, you know, we've increased our number of near misses or reporting accidents, can't have been an easy message to land. What is your thinking around that? What are you trying to create in that space?
Yeah, I think, you know, near-miss reporting, as much as we want to get the data around where events are happening so we can analyse the trends and put in place interventions, for me, near-miss reporting is all about, it's almost like a measurement of culture.
Yeah.
It's almost a measurement of, actually, that might not necessarily be a near-miss by definition, but the fact of the matter is somebody's seen something, they've taken the time to report it, and you know, they may have been able to make an intervention at source at the time as well. So for me, regardless of whatever that was, you know, it's a positive thing for health and safety culture.
Yes.
And you know, that is, you know, particularly sort of one of the areas we talk about a lot at the moment is psychological safety and people feeling empowered to talk up. Actually, it's those areas perhaps where there's no near misses being reported or few accidents being reported. They're perhaps the areas then that you might have more concern about.
Yeah, so if you were going into an organisation, those might be the things that you'd look for first.
And it does, I mean, you know, if you're getting accident reports for the minor injuries, it gives you a really good feeling actually that if something a little bit more, you know, slightly worse incidents, that they're always going to be reported. So,
Absolutely.
so yeah, it does gives you a lot of clear indication about culture.
Yeah, it really struck me, and I'm sure it was in the pandemic that I listened to the audiobook Fearless Organisation.
Yes.
And what really struck me was the example that really stays with me is two hospitals.
Yes.
One where the reporting rate was very high, but there was a lower death rate, versus there was a less reporting rate on near misses or accidents, but there was a higher death rate. And it really challenged my thinking in this space around, and linked to culture actually, Lisa, and what you're talking about in terms of, do people feel compelled enough to go and report, or actually would they see that snitching on the boss, or they're creating work, or it's just not important enough in their world because they're in their silo. And I love the fact what you said earlier around, you know, there's a bigger picture at play for an organisation, you know, and therefore it strikes me that data, whilst we rely on data a lot, it's not always the answer, and that's what I'm hearing you say in terms of having an increase in reporting actually can be a great indicator if it's what the strategy is towards and what you're trying to achieve.
I think, you know, you can look at near miss reports. What's important to us was actually how many different people reported near misses. Because you could have, you know, 1,000 near misses, but if 800 of them were reported by the safety team, it's, you know, actually doesn't what we'd really like. I'd rather have, you know, 200, but 200 different people each report one near miss each, you know. So the number's obviously important. It's, like I say, it's not a silver bullet, but it gives you a good indication. But it's really interesting to try and, you know, see how many people are reporting. And, you know, I'd even open that up to contractors, etc., and other users of buildings as well. If you can create a system where people feel that anyone can report, you know, we're all, you know, it's the old saying, someone once said to me, you're only as good as your weakest contractor in an organisation. So it's not just your own employees, but bringing that whole ethos across to all the different users who might be in an organisation.
Yeah, I think I'm really excited about the fact that health and safety becomes another measure or indicator of culture and psychological safety, you know, if you look at it that way. And it means that, you know, then it has a role to play on the senior leader table, you know, to be able to shift and move that dial. What sort of things have you done to ensure that leaders, because they have to take on this health and safety practice, are feeling able to speak up? And also from a senior management level, how have we influenced or convinced them that, you know, higher reporting and this data shift is a good move?
Well, you know, we all know that health and safety, as much for me, it's about people. You know, I mean, health and safety people aren't necessarily in love with regulations. I know that's very often, you know, what people are applied with, but for me it's all about people, and I think that comes back to my time at the leisure centre. So I'll come on to your question in a minute.
No,
but
that's good.
you know, when I was at the gym, it was all about customer service, and it was about making sure that each and every person that walked in for that facility, you said hello, you asked them how their day was, and you got to know them. And I think, you know, actually I put that in really good grounding for what I want to do as health and safety. You know, I really like people, and I really want people to go home safe and well at the end of each and every day. But, you know, when you think about the cost of accidents and the cost of getting it wrong, it's absolutely crucial for anyone to want a successful business to get health and safety right. And, you know, you might see obviously the headline numbers around prosecutions, but actually, you know, even small incidences are incredibly costly. You know, if someone has to stop work, it might just be a cut finger. You know, that person stops work, maybe the first aider stops work, you fill in the accident book. You know, there's some level of investigation that then needs to get reported. So that sort of downtime, when you start to add them up, you're already sort of coming into the hundreds of pounds. If someone has a lost time injury, you know, and you start to then think about, well, we need to first aid, somebody's off work, you're still paying their wages, paying somebody overtime, the time it costs to do the investigation, and then we all sit around a table to talk about what happened. Yeah, absolutely crucial. But you start putting the numbers around that, and you'll soon see, actually, you know, avoidance and getting that culture right is, you know, absolutely crucial for an organisation to be successful.
Great. So another measure actually of culture, return on investment, that says, you know, that some real hard facts as well in there to help shift that dial. I really like that.
But I was thinking about like recent examples where, you know, the debate around schools, for example, heatwave, you talked about it earlier, you know, and whether schools should be open or not open. Like, that's a relevant debate, you know, for leaders to make a call on. Like politicians, schools, users, the influence that has, and like we've not dealt with it before. No. You know, in the same way we've not dealt with a pandemic.
No.
So like the underlying principles of this being so important and so imperative on an organisation at a given moment in time, you know, it almost brings it to the absolute fore, doesn't it? For organisations to have robust plans, and it goes back to what you said, really.
Yeah, it's you know, and this is the importance of having a health and safety management system. So you've got a system that enables you to react to all these different things. And I think, you know, in my career, I can't think of a time now, perhaps, where we're reacting more significantly to our environment and the things around us. You know, climate change, for example, you mentioned the heat there, but actually, you know, the inclement weather, the floods, the winds, that has huge implications on assets and the way that we work and operate now. And then, you know, we talk about AI, you know, that's another factor that's now coming in, and, you know, it has some really powerful uses in health and safety, the way it is perhaps across all other sectors. But it brings with it as well some really important challenges. You know, we spoke earlier about how crucial it is to engage with people. And perhaps that AI now is drawing people away from those sort of face-to-face conversations a little bit. So you know, it's health and safety has changed dramatically from when I first got into the you know, going back to Anglo-Palladian supervisors sort of 20 plus years ago. But it's really crucial that we can adapt to that, and I think that's what makes a great leader, right? Is being able to constantly change and constantly evolve with the environment and the surrounding around us. And you sort of mentioned COVID. You know, all of a sudden people are now working at home. That's another set of challenges. So all of these things, you know, we're constantly, as health and safety professionals, having to sort of reevaluate our risk profile. Yeah. And so it's lots and lots of skill sets, I think, other than just compliance and knowledge of the legislation. You need to be all of those different aspects, I think, in terms of providing great sound leadership.
You've clearly got those in abundance, though, right? You've rattled off some of those new acts like that. I was like, that's impressive.
Absolutely. I'm going to talk about the pandemic because we haven't touched on your more recent career. So when that happened, you were in Birmingham Airport. So you were health and safety in Birmingham. Tell us about some of the practices that you had to adapt to and put in place to deal with something that was absolutely beyond.
So I literally had only been with the airport a few months, really, when the pandemic came into place. I mean, one thing I think that really struck me was how well all the other airports came together. Yeah. And, you know, the feeling was that obviously a lot of global flights stopped, but there was still a number of domestic flights happening. But we really wanted to feel like if you're a passenger that got on a plane in Edinburgh, for example, and landed in Birmingham or landed in Heathrow, that they should experience the same level of protection, if you like, or standards. So it really, actually, for me, being quite new to that industry, it really brought the industry together. Yes. And all the different airports had WhatsApp groups and everything else. So again, sort of another thing I've always embraced is looking not only within your own sector but outside your sector to find solutions. But that sort of really brought us all together, and some really key learnings from that. But yeah, it was almost like a weekly call. Again, you know, when you think about aviation in particular, the government brought out lots of different standards for retail. Of course, we're a huge sort of retail experience there. There was different guidance for transport. So all these different guidance really applied to the airport, and construction. We were in the middle of a huge, big terminal transformation project. So we almost had to take all of these different standards that had been written separate for different organisations and try and amalgamate those and make it work across our whole environment. So yeah, huge challenge for us.
Absolutely. And what might you take as, I mean, there must have been so many learnings, how I can narrow those down, but what maybe have you taken from that scenario, that situation that you now put into practice in your current world? Yeah,
so it was really a real joint effort, you know, and bringing lots and lots of different people together. And I think, you know, what sort of came from that, I think, was, you know, a really sort of compliant environment to the best that we possibly could, really good team learnings, everyone bringing different ideas in different situations. And it sort of goes back to what I was saying earlier. You know, you pretty much think you've got it covered, and then somebody say, well, hang on, in our world, we've got this challenge here.
Yes.
How do we deal with that? So yeah, it's just the power of bringing leaders together who've got different insights, different experiences, and coming together to make something that really works.
And again, collaboration is a hot topic for leaders, and that shows a real demonstration of great collaboration. I guess, how did you get the messages out? Once you've collaborated and decided this is the way forward, what did you learn about communication as leaders and making sure that people adopted these new practices that you had to put out there?
Yes, so as you can appreciate, lots and lots of internal and external communications that were happening. I think it's, the message there was just making sure how clear you had to make your communications. Lots of people working at home as well through furlough. So one thing I would say was really the message about using lots and lots of different communication techniques.
Yes.
That might be everything from having day-to-day welfare calls or telephone calls with people who are perhaps at home on furlough, keeping them updated in terms of what's happening, the messaging that obviously had to go out to the public, and all of those groups that were operators within the airport, for example. So a whole different range of posters, communications. What was clear, though, we had one central communications team, and so it was really crucial that we followed that and we didn't deviate from that.
Great. And was there any things that didn't go to plan or work as you really wanted to?
Yeah, I mean, sort of, because it was a constant changing dynamic environment, you were constantly learning all the time, and, you would, in theory, perhaps put in place a particular control, but then obviously sometimes these things, when you put them into place and practically didn't quite work. So this is where that sort of constant engagement was absolutely crucial, and we'd all sort of feedback. We'd all go away with different tasks, different areas to look after, and by the other side of the coin, there's perhaps things happening really well which we could then take and share more widely. So yeah.
Yeah, what an experience. You've had some amazing experiences.
Constant learning. I love that.
It's
and the
constant
aviation industry is known for that, isn't it? It's like the gold standard of how do we constantly improve, how are we really inquisitive so we don't repeat mistakes. But I'd not thought of it in that complexity, actually. When you were saying all the things, I was like, that's giving me a headache a little bit. trying to manage all that.
I mean it was hugely aviation in particular was hugely devastating by COVID, but we did, I think sort of with my sort of time in health and safety, I've managed to work with some really great leaders, and we used that at the airport. We managed to bring in leaders from other sectors, sort of particularly as we're going sort of through the recovery phase, to actually come and talk to our colleagues and say, look, this is what our experience was like for us. Yes, we are still sort of dealing with that, but it actually, very often people can often think that those issues are just for them and these are the challenges that they're experiencing, when actually having those conversations and talking perhaps outside of your sector a little bit really helps people understand and go, well, hang on, everyone's going through the same challenges and the same journeys. And I think, that really helps people, I think, as well. Yeah.
I think what comes out for me, Simon, in all those different things is that, and we talk about health and safety, but you really have an in-service kind of leadership mindset, and you started in that space like customer service, and you are working with, to come up with a positive solution, and the collaboration and the human element, which we talk about a lot on this podcast, really comes across as really strongly. So they can learn lots of lessons about that. And I know that you are somebody who prides yourself on kind of keeping abreast of health and safety and what we might need to think about. And you mentioned a few things like climate change and AI. What are the hot topics that our leaders might come across and might have to start thinking about when it comes to health and safety in this space?
And that's a really great question. I mean, one of the other areas has been diversity, of course.
Yeah.
And how does diversity affect health and safety? Well, perhaps people on low incomes are struggling more than others. They might be taking additional jobs, for example, working longer hours. They might be actually experiencing more stress, and we know when people are stressed and they're not focusing on the activities that they're doing, that's when accident occurs. We know that perhaps females are more likely to raise issues and speak up a little bit more than men, So again, when you're thinking about reporting of hazards and incidences or long hours, these are all factors that we need to be thinking about now in the modern workplace. So, and there's many examples around sort of diversity, making sure, the traditional health and safety methods of writing risk assessments and safe systems by word, actually how well are they being received perhaps to the modern workplace. And I always like to try and think a little bit outside the box, so if we can use images, if we can use short films perhaps to sort of put across those safety messages, that might be perhaps a better way of communication. So, and this is the thing, although there are certain requirements that we have to meet, the way that we deliver them within our own workspace is unique, and it's down to us to make that work. And I think actually that's why health and safety is so exciting.
Yeah, and so important,
Yeah.
I guess we don't ever think of it really as a massive well-being, wellness topic, but it is, I guess ultimately it's ensuring that our people are thriving and working in an environment that's safe, and that they can be their best at. It's an absolute fundamental core. And diversity, as is a big topic, and neurodiversity actually, and a big topic out there. AI, as you said. So those are leadership topics, and actually, if we look at it from a health and safety perspective, they can probably drive some of those indicators. I think that is what's exciting, that alignment. Is there any regulation or anything coming through that's going to help leaders or support leaders think about this more effectively?
So there's lots of legislation now. The Health and Safety Executive in the UK are looking at. You've got the control of lead regulations, where they're potentially looking at reporting changes to exposure levels.
Yes.
Reporting of injuries, diseases and dangerous occurrence regulations. So they're actually looking at increasing the number of events that need to be reported, whether that be ill health or dangerous occurrence. And there's various bits of guidance now. Fire safety is huge. That's under a lot of scrutiny since Grenfell and the Building Safety Act. So in spite of all these other sort of cultural pieces,
Yes.
there's still the legislative elements as well that we need to stay on top of, and we need to be preparing for.
Absolutely. So there's a real education piece in some of that stuff as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Well, I don't think I've ever spoken about health and safety for this long or understood it from that many different angles. We should, absolutely.
We absolutely should.
But I don't, it's really made me curious. There's lots of things going off in my head around it, actually, and in different contexts, different worlds, different applications. I'm sure we could talk all day, but I just want to thank you, because you've made me really... I'll go away probably with more questions than answers in some ways, to then go and apply, how do we go and do this and make it better? And particularly, like you said about heatwave, because that's right now, but actually the knock-on effect, and I guess there's always a flip, is the flooding, for example. That stayed with me. What's been the key call-out for you?
I think there's just such an alignment I talked about as culture, so those indicators really are exciting, that actually can walk the floor and notice behaviours around health and safety, and they give you some real indicators and some return on investment around how do we shift some of that culture. I think you've talked about being in service as a leader, but often like that solution focus, that meeting the people where they are, I think that's really important, that they know their job. So we could come up with all sorts of regulation or, ways of doing things, but actually if it doesn't meet that individual, and how many organisations do that outside health and safety, so we can learn a lot about that. I think collaboration is really, real key. It's a really big area to focus on, and then just managing in uncertainty as well. Leadership in uncertainty is a really important driver. So lots to take from this conversation. Absolutely loved it. Thank you so much for being part of our conversation.
Thank you. I mean, I'm a big fan of the podcast, so to have the opportunity to come and meet you and speak is, I've really enjoyed it. So thank you very much.
Later.
So I do have one final question. I ask it of all the guests. Who should we have on the podcast in the hot seat where you are that's been an influence in your career?
That's a question. Can I think about that?
Of course you can.
Come back to us on that.
Give us the answer afterwards. That's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
So thank you everybody for watching and listening. Really think about how it relates to you and your world. And as ever, like, comment and subscribe below.
That was below.
Below? Yeah, I saw the below.
Hit and miss. I do it sometimes.
See you next time on Leadership Actually. Thank you.